Well, the worst is going to be, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but see, tonight that might change our mind.
Oh, you're back, okay.
Lordy.
And our attorneys are here today. Okay. You have us? Okay, we're ready to go. I'll hereby call the regular meeting of Tuesday, August 1st, 2017 for the City of Angels to order. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Okay, Mary?
Yes,
What
sir.
action, the closed session, July 18th, we had, what was,
We're going to, the July 18th, we're going to reconvene.
no, July 18th, we had closed session, we had instructions
I'm
were
sorry,
given
I
to,
wasn't here. What was
instructions were given to administration and also to our attorneys.
What happened in July 18th?
As far as the action taken in closed session this evening, we are going to reconvene after the meeting because we did not complete our discussions.
The July 18th is whatever you had in closed session. I wasn't here, and I don't know what, did you
We
continue to
directly
the,
staff.
you didn't continue to the end of the meeting? Or
No,
anything?
because we had to close and come.
That's what I'm
We
saying.
did, we continued to the end of the meeting, and we're reporting
Okay,
out
so
now
you
that
reported out, and then
I-
probably directions given to
direction was
staff?
given to staff.
Because it was an MOU, or it was MOU,
It was
so
MOU,
directions
yes.
given to staff.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me, before you start the meeting, could we please use the microphone?
Okay, we can try, but we can try to get as close as we can here. Try to speak up. Okay, I'm looking for an approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes they want to make on the agenda? Anybody in the public or anybody on the dais? I'll entertain a motion.
Move. Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Follendor, second by Councilperson Herman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, now we have a consolidated report in our packets, the staff reports. Does anybody have any questions regarding our staff reports? Amanda's searching.
I have a question. I don't know what Dave, but one of you. The trees downtown, are you looking to just redo the sidewalk, or are we looking to just cut back the roots? Okay. Sorry, these mics stuck. These mic, I was asking about the trees downtown. Are you just only redoing the sidewalks, or are you gonna do something also about the roots?
Well, where the tripping hazards are, we'll cut the roots and
Okay.
replace the sidewalks, so nobody trips. And if we
Okay.
do damage the tree, we'll look for a replacement.
Okay.
I was also wanting to ask about the trees. I had been on vacation in a city, and they had a kind of imitation bark with spongy material around the trees. I didn't know if you'd heard about it, and I didn't find anyone to ask about it. But when we walked and we stepped where near, it was like a square, and they had little spongy material, but it was fake bark. And we'd step on it and we'd go, ooh, so it must have retained water, but I didn't know. I just thought, well, maybe, I don't know if you'd heard of this new thing, that's all.
No, but I have seen that.
Oh, yeah. I wonder what it's.
don't remember where it was, though.
Yeah, okay, this was in Laguna Beach, so you can always call them and say, hey, what'd you do? But I don't know if it would help us, I have no idea, but it just was curious, we all noticed it as we were walking down the street.
I have a question for, I guess, the police department in regards to the pet bathhouse investigation. I understand that it's continuing. However, someone said that they're still operating, they're open and operating. Is that true?
question was, is Bathhouse still operating?
Yes.
As of now, yes. Now that the criminal investigation is still ongoing, they found things, they have, that item will be going to the planning commission for review in terms of conditional use permit. They have a conditional use permit to operate, so they can continue to operate as long as that conditional use permit's in place. And then there's a whole separate process on how to revoke and review conditional use permits. So theirs is coming up. There's been about 18 months, which is usually about the time we start reviewing conditional use permits. So we'll be taking a look at that. Probably not at this, probably at the September, October meeting. So,
Okay.
but it doesn't necessarily mean they can't operate up until that point. So they can operate until, if the city decides to pull that conditional use permit.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to council updates. Councilperson Matilde, do you have any reports?
No. No.
Vice Mayor Fallendorf?
Yes, I attended UWPA last week, and it looks like, fingers crossed, if the process goes according to plan, we will be looking at a remat before November 1st, which helps us with our contributions to Utica Water and Power this year. So if that goes, and the timeline goes according to plan with the state, we may not be having to add that additional cost. So I think that Julie might be needing to get a hold of them, but I still think we should hold on to it just in case it extends another couple months. So,
Okay.
that's it.
Okay. Councilperson Herman?
What about John? Oh.
Obviously, this bill is my company. I'll be last.
Oh, whatever. Okay, well, I also went to the meeting, the UWPA, but then I met with Michael Minkler afterwards, the day after, and he explained it so I could kind of understand it, which was really wonderful, of how there's megawatts, and if we have a small quantity of megawatts in our power grid or whatever, then they have passed a law, which means we can charge PG&E a bunch of money. So that's how we're going to be able to succeed in not having to pay so much towards UWPA. So that's a great thing. But also, I wanted to say that he asked to please invite the rest of the council members to call him, because he would love to explain, because it's really complicated, and I have not understood things that well. So anyway, so you might want to do that. He would love to. And he wanted to give us a tour of the flumes and everything at some point. I said, oh, goody, a flume. But anyway, so you can tell I'm a city girl. And then the other thing was, sharing, was just a little short thing. I did visit Laguna Beach, which is my hometown, and it was so interesting because I suddenly realized how much, in a much more expensive way, it's like Angels Camp in that it's on a highway. The main street of town is right through the Highway 1 and Pacific Coast, and the sidewalks are not so hot, and it's super crowded, and yet it works, and they have tourists by herds and herds. So anyway, just to be uplifted, we don't have in Laguna, we don't have sidewalks on most of our inner streets that go up the hill. So, you know, there's some very positive things that I suddenly realized that what they had was not, the traffic wasn't that disturbing to everyone who's there because of all of the interests that they had and all of the things that they were doing. So I think we can look at our town in a different way if you compare the two.
Okay, thank you.
No report from me.
No report? Okay, I too attended the UWPA meeting, and that remat contract is a big deal. It about doubles our revenue. So it takes us from having to pay a lot of money to bring water down the hill to paying little, if anything at all. So it is a big deal. I also attended the NCPA dinner. They have a dinner every year. They try to get all the water water folks from all around together from the Sacramento region, and they always put on a nice event. It's a good networking event. And then finally this morning, another networking event. I attended the Coffee Tuesday. It's something that Destination Angels Camp is supporting, and it kind of just gets whoever's interested showing up for a cup of coffee and just chat about things. And to me, the most important news was that we're gaining ground at the Utica Hotel. So hopefully by December, the bar will be open. Not sure what the name of it will be, maybe Miners Lounge, maybe something else, I don't know. But hopefully we'll be having some Christmas cheer underground in the hotel. Now we're going to go on to public comment, and this portion of the meeting is reserved for people who want to talk about stuff that's not on the agenda. The state law prohibits us from taking action of anything that's not on the agenda. So is there anybody would like to step up and make a comment?
My name is Lori White. I live in Angel Oaks. I had a comment from a concerned citizen that she would like to see the city consider putting some kind of awning or some kind of protection over the play area at the park, similar to that they have in Murphy's, because the play equipment is so hot the kids can't play on it, especially at this time of year. And I know we've had excessive heat this year, but even in years that it's not this hot, the play equipment does get hot and too hot for the kids to play on. I can't really speak to that because I don't go to playgrounds, but, and if I do, I don't get on the equipment. But I know the kids say that it's too hot, and if you could do something about that, that would be very nice.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Gina Gonzalez. I am starting to attend these meetings, and I feel like there's a lot of people that need to know about these meetings that are really interested in what's going on in our community. And I can tell you personally that I spent 40 minutes, and I'm not a stupid person, trying to find the agenda for this meeting. Whoever is doing your website is terrible, and I would, if they were standing right here, I would give them an earful, because I swear on my life that it was a ridiculous act. I had to call the city department to find the website, to find the agenda, to be able to see what's going on here. And I am not alone. I talked to many people at the Board of Supervisors meeting about the same thing, and it's the same subject of conversation, Angels Camp agenda. We don't know what's going on. So I will be an advocate, and I will be up here every single meeting stating the same thing, or maybe you guys can give me a who is who on the agenda, or who your website is, because I would like to talk to them. I am not electronically smart, but I'm a basic human being, and there's many basic human beings out there that would like to know how to get in these meetings. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. I appreciate those comments. The second comment I made myself this week as well. Google search isn't bringing us up, so that's something that we are definitely working on, we're aware of, and I actually sent a note to staff saying, hey, I couldn't find our phone number. So I hear you.
Yeah, can I say, I found, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I found the same thing. I kept getting, I just shot you, and then it says everything you try to get when you do a search is this site that's been removed, but you get an error. And we are, unless you put angelscamp.gov with www.angels, you don't get it. If you do that, you'll get it, but we need to, with the search, all of that has to be
Yeah,
improved.
and
I
we are
think
still
last
working on it,
month-
just so you know. We are
Yeah.
still working on it. We just had a new contractor put in, so we had some issues before, and they will be done hopefully before the end of summer, just so you know.
I was just going to remind the public that we did pass a resolution last month, I believe it was, to get that fixed. So it's been an ongoing, we're fully aware of it. So.
Thank you for noticing. It's pretty cool that someone tried.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda items are expected to be routine. They'll be acted upon by the council at one time without discussion. However, any city council member, staff member, or interested person may request that the consent items be removed for discussion. We have one today, and that's to adopt Resolution 17-27. It's a resolution issuing a notice of completion for the North Baker and Bush Street Sewer Improvement Project. Does anybody want to remove that item for discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll motion.
I have a motion from Councilperson Oliveira, seconded by Councilperson Matilde. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, item 1 of the regular agenda, continuation of a public hearing. We're confirming a diagram and assessment and directing Auditor of Calaveras County to continue to collect assessments for the 2017-2018 fiscal year for the Landscaping and Lighting District Number 1 at Greenhorn Creek.
Okay, I was not here for the last meeting, but as I understand it, the assessment value got increased to 300, which it was previously several years ago. And I think there was one other change in administrative fees or something. I could be mistaken. I didn't see that. I saw it on TV, but I'm not sure what exactly it was. So Julie will explain it, but it's in your packet.
The assessments went up to $300 as directed. There was a new increase to the line item to prepay the debt as directed. And I believe we answered the question about the management fees to the council in the background. Essentially, that was an error in what was being shown as comparative to last year, and it wasn't really a difference. It was because the last year numbers were incorrect. Is that about accurate? Yeah. So we think we've answered all the questions and done what the council asked us to do from last week.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from the public? Any questions from the council? We're good with what we've learned? Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Move.
Moved by, do we have a second?
I wasn't here, so,
I'll second. Okay.
just because.
Moved by Vice Mayor Follendorf, seconded by Councilperson Oliveira. And the motion will be to adopt Resolution 1723. It's a resolution approving engineer's report as amended, confirming diagram and assessment, and directing Auditor of Calaveras County to continue and to collect assessments for fiscal year 17-18 for the Landscaping and Lighting District Number 1 at Greenhorn Creek. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Item number 2 is a public hearing. It's to approve the resolution adopting the Sustainable Communities Grant Main Street Plan. Mr. Hannum.
It might still have to be turned on.
Okay. All right, here we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your patience. Tonight before you is the final approval for the Sustainable Communities Grant. Just kind of give you a background. In 2015, the city applied competitive grant for a Sustainable Communities Grant through Caltrans for approximately $205,000. We were awarded that. The purpose of the grant was to take a look at the downtown area as well as our what we call our uptown or our midtown area, basically from Murphy's Grade Road south to the whole area. Well, the city hired a design workshop and their team to put together a plan that illustrates that generated from public input, advisory committee meetings, site walks, site visits, and they put together a design plan to do that. The plan went to the Planning Commission in July. The Planning Commission approved the plan. There were some issues regarding the 449 intersection, but I think we got through those. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to kind of turn it over to Steve Knoll from Design Workshop. Hopefully we can get this program going. Just to kind of give you more analysis of it, what we looked at was kind of the design guidelines for streetscapes, along with sign designs and design guidelines within the downtown, as well as looking kind of a little bit at the parking. We looked at parking in the downtown, parking alternatives you'll see, and also try to create a more pedestrian pedestrian amenities within the downtown, as well as what we call Midtown or even Utica Park. You'll see some slides on that. We also, as part of the plan, we had 3 public workshops and 3 site walks where the public was able to come out and actually walk the site with the consultant and take notes and do those types of things. We had community workshops where we had a lot of input regarding amenities within the downtown and how the downtown should look in the future. There was a lot of discussions, and I thought it was a pretty good convolution of everybody's comments together, put together for a plan that I think will do a good thing for the city. A lot of these things are, again, these are guidelines and plans. They're not set in stone. A lot of these approvals will have to come back before the council if we're going to take a look at some of the design features of the downtown, as well as, or at least the planning commission would have to approve a lot of the new designs that would come in and come through based on the way the zoning ordinance is set up. So these are things that we're just not trying to go out and do tomorrow, that will be constructed tomorrow. These are, some of these items are long-term items, 10, 15 years down the road. We do have, in terms of, we are kind of lucky in one sense, is that part of the projects we're designing right now in terms of our CMAQ grant that we got for the Main Street, or for the sidewalks on 49. So we might be able to pull in some of the design features of the Main Street plan into those designs, just to get an idea of terms of cost of improvements in those. And we're also applying for active transportation, which you approved a resolution at the last meeting for us to apply for ATP to construct. So there's still a lot of variables on when these programs all come into place, but the Main Street plan gives us a good guideline and a good outline of how the town could look through, basically from Midtown down to the downtown. So are you ready? Are you guys ready? Okay. So what I'm going to do right now is, hopefully this is on. Aha. Okay, I'm not going to power off. I'm going to turn it over to Steve Knoll. He's the project manager with Design Workshop, and he'll go through his program. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and either he or I will be able to answer those questions. So turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, council, audience. Pardon me, but this is 20 degrees warmer than I'm used to because I live up South Lake Tahoe, so I'm sitting there sweating like crazy thinking, taking a bath. As Dave mentioned, this is a vision plan. It's the efforts of the city, Caltrans, and Calaveras County of governments as a three-pronged effort to bring to you a vision plan that you could use for a number of ways. One, it's a tool for you to look at, as Dave described, some investment opportunities in the way of grants and collaborating again with like COG and Caltrans to bring additional monies to implement some of these things. The other thing it's used for is for you guys, you with the help of the community, to make some decisions on some of the things you could go forward with, either short-term or long-term. And then finally, it does serve as a good purpose if you're trying to get reinvestment or maybe new business in town. If someone coming to town to do some, or someone that already lives here wants to invest, they see that the city has put their ideas and thoughts behind something. So it has a good purpose to it. Tonight we have. Here we go. I think I'll do this. Is that where I can? So tonight we have it's about a 15-minute presentation, just a high-level view. For those of you who have not been aware of the process, it's been about 18 months, and the result of this is really a document, like I said, that can be used. But this is just giving you highlights of what's in the document tonight. And it is on the website, so if someone wants to look at it after, or after this meeting, they can.
And is that angelscamp.gov?
Maybe. No. Yeah. No, actually, it has its own. Yeah. PlanningAngelsCamp.com. Yeah. So you remember a couple years back you did a study that took you on the 449, which is upper left-hand corner, all the way down to Murphy's Grade. This study, this last year and a half, is really the red area from Murphy's Grade all the way down to the intersection of 4 as you head south. So that's what we're going to be calling the study area throughout the document. Early along, there's a vision put kind of out there to test and see what this document is really trying to solve at the end. And it's usually intended to be very high level, but from this standpoint, it says that this project seeks to address community design, public spaces, bicycle, pedestrian facilities, and parking facilities along city's Highway 49 Main Street in order to develop a vision for downtown. So that's really what the high-level project vision was, and now we'll go through kind of the steps and how we got there. There will be talked about four main areas within this document, or tonight's presentation. Public, complete streets, which is really balancing the pedestrian, bicycles, and travel demands along the corridor. Second is wayfinding, whether it's by foot, by car. Parking was an issue discussed a lot, so finding strategies for parking and also allowing for people to know where to park. And then finally, what is called placemaking, or finding opportunities within the community to maybe find a few spots to create more public spaces. If I'm going too fast, just tell me to slow down. If I'm going too slow, I can talk faster. Here's a process. We're here at the end. We're here tonight. Started with phase one was a kickoff, a good about 3 or 4 months of public outreach. Design guidelines was a draft of those to kind of summarize what we found. And then, of course, the implementation and financing plan. And then finally, last few months have been really tightening up the document and get it ready for tonight. So there's a section in the appendix that talks a lot about the existing conditions. Like anything, you have done a number of studies before, but we actually had a few done as well. And all those are in the appendix of the document, and so we don't have to get into details whether there were traffic counts, there were noise, the heat. We actually took and measured the temperature of the streets and stuff like that. So all of that's in the appendix, but it did teach us quite a bit through the efforts here. In addition, you've had a number of studies done over the past years. We looked at those. We took what we thought was appropriate to use and be part of this document, particularly your wayfinding plan and also the study that was just done recently for the 449. Kind of in a very high summary, some of the challenges, the roadway itself. It's physically challenged with the space, but also some of the conditions of grades and things like that. Parking was obviously seems to be a problem, and then just general circulation. But that also lends himself for some opportunities. Those would be the pedestrian and bike safety opportunities, access to shops and amenities, which was important, creating gathering spaces, which I mentioned, coordinated signage and parking, but most importantly, we want to make sure this always highlights and doesn't change the history of Angels Camp. Pardon me, I got to do one of these. I've never had it this bad. Next slide. So we did have a public outreach, and this is I really like this photograph because this was a site walk, and just on the right-hand side you can kind of see the conditions in some part of the community. What's cut off in this picture is on the left-hand side was a big logging truck coming down. So at one point you have this conflict of big trucks and people walking, and so this plan's not going to solve everything, but give you some ideas about how you might start to approach some of those. There was a website. Whether you could find it or not. No, I'm looking over to you. No, there was a website that was available. After each meeting, we actually had the people go online and have a response if they couldn't make the meeting. Facebook was there, so we had a lot of people, over 500 people that were tracking this at some point. As Dave mentioned, we had stakeholder meetings, walking tours, we had 2 of those. And then, of course, other stakeholder meetings, which we actually walked the property. We had boards set up in certain parts of the community one of the times, and just had people at their time, if they had, to come by and learn more about the project and give us some input. We had what we call an advisory committee, and they were strategic people within the community that were selected to represent key folks within the broadest sense of the community. Part of their purpose was to be there on a regular basis, and most importantly, then go back and deliver that message to their respective groups and get them engaged. So we really relied on that advisory committee, and they were a good group. They did very well, and I was impressed with the rigor and the commitment that they had throughout the process. And of course, the 3 public meetings that we held. First one was just kind of identifying what the project was about. Second was to share some ideas, and third was just to kind of show some of the results of those efforts that we came up with. So now we're just going to get into some of the quick design concepts. Again, the 4 area: streets, wayfinding, parking, in this case public spaces. We really focused on 5 is in addition to kind of the overall things that address some of the higher levels, within each one of these, we address a few key areas that were most important and probably some that to be considered. What do we hear? 92% survey they drive to Main Street, so there's not a whole lot of people walking or biking down here right now. That doesn't mean that won't change. The infrastructure is not there yet, not all of it, but that's current what's going on. I can read all these, all the way down to difficult to close down SR 49 for events. So it is your main, it's not only just your main highway through here and your main street, but it's also your event space. So you have these conflicting uses that happen. Maybe not as much as they could, but they do happen. So here's the 5 kind of areas we talked about: Commercial Main Street, Bragg Street intersection, Historic Main Street, Raspberry Street intersection, and the Vallecino intersection. So from the Commercial Main Street perspective, this is probably the section within the study area that's more auto-dominant with regard to parking and stuff. It's all on-site versus on-site versus on-street. So you have a little bit more opportunity to claim some of that public realm for the pedestrian and the bicyclist. With that said, again, we're talking about connectivity to the communities, to downtown, and also provide a nice, safe environment in which people can walk and move about. So in case of this section here, some of the ideas were detached sidewalks, so where the space allows it, actually have space between the curb to provide some shade, some trees, maybe some ground covers, that type of stuff, and get the person away from the side of the road. In areas where it's a little tighter, it'd have to be attached sidewalk, but still having a connectivity opportunity. Adding the bike lanes, which you see throughout, and then we'll discuss later where we stop those. And then finally, bulb outs, which are just basically opportunities where you can to bring the pedestrian closer so that cars can see them sooner. And we'll have a better image of that here later. Upper left-hand corner is just an idea about before, what's there right at Mike's Pizza. And right side is if you just implemented some streetscape improvement opportunities. So this was one that was just kind of thrown out there to say what if, because there was Bragg Street actually has some of the highest collision numbers in the area. And so we're looking at it from a transportation perspective and also from a walkability perspective. And while, as Dave mentioned before, these are visions, ideas that may never happen, but there is an opportunity to go to the next level and see if it would really make sense to alter Bragg Street into being a one-way out right, or actually remove it altogether. The image up on the left just kind of puts in perspective what that looks like. So we didn't do a visual simulation of that, but I think you get the idea that there is some opportunity at that particular intersection. Historic Main Street, 5 items: implement continuous sidewalks and bike lanes. Actually, not bike lanes all the way through Historic Main Street. I'll back up on that in a second. Additional landscaping, increase of public space, and encourage programs to benefit businesses. So what that's talking about is that section there, as you come into historic downtown, is when you first kind of arrive. You, at the bottom of the hill, visitor center off to the right. You already have in your gateway program a gateway up above that tells people they've actually crossed that threshold in the automobile. And now as you're getting down closer, it's really more of a pedestrian space at that point. So anything we can do is to bring the activity, as I think Councilwoman Herman, you were talking about Laguna Beach, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Pedestrian has to feel like they can walk around. I think this is, you have with some very minor adjustments can really increase that capability. We don't actually have the bike connection all the way through, but we do connect the bike lane connection to Future Angels Camp Trail. So the idea is you're going to have that come through anyhow, and we want to respect that and be part of that improvement process for that. Raspberry Street, very simple, bulb outs, bring the pedestrians out closer so cars can see them. Has a way of slowing traffic down, has a way of people understanding that this is a little different environment than where they just passed through up the road about 1.5 miles. And this illustration down below just shows how you just simply bring those bulb outs out, and all of a sudden it feels like a pedestrian space. And you've all been in communities like this. This isn't anything new. I think this is an opportunity in your community to do this. And then finally, the Vallecino intersection, we've had extensive talks on this one. But with the idea that it's not to just say we're going to change traffic, it's really to create that gateway element that comes into town from the south. There's a couple options shown up there to say, well, if we just reconfigured the way the cars moved, and I know change is tough, but sometimes it's easy, then these are some ways it might happen. Now, we had a very good discussion with the Planning Commission about this, and, you know, one of the things that came out of that was, why don't we just try striping it and see what happens? You know, rather than, you don't have to build it right away, there's ways to actually introduce it without actually going much further than just the idea about what that might be. Does everyone understand how this works? Need any? All right, you guys got it. Now about signs, what we heard, signs are the businesses are too difficult to see, and that's standard with any downtown areas. That's usually always the case. Historic towns, it's, you know, they weren't designed years ago for cars driving 25, 30 miles by to see them, so that's pretty normal. Roadway sign is cluttered and ineffective. That does happen. There's a lot over time, signs pop up. Block out another one. There's a classic image in the book where you have a parking sign and something else in front, but you can't see the two. So there's some very basic cleanup of signs and wayfinding that you can do in the community, all the way down to making sure that whatever is proposed or put in, it really has to fit into the historic character of the Angels Camp and not change that at all. The image on the left, not necessarily what we're suggesting. Those are just showing how other communities do that. The ones at the bottom, I mean, in the middle of the page, were actually came from your wayfinding. We did a little bit of the parking. I think we modified that one a little bit, but you already have that wayfinding package in document in place, so it's just a matter of implementing it. We just embraced that and said that you have to keep pushing that until it gets done. This is just a real quick thing saying if someone just knew where to park, you know, you don't know you have this whole parking lot down here for the most part till you left town, then you can't get back. So when we talk about movements and parking here shortly, you can see how we've suggested maybe solving that. And then the interpretive signage, again, this is something that came from the other document that you had, and we're just making sure that it keeps showing up, because if it just gets stuck in one document, it usually doesn't get implemented. What we heard about parking, hard to find. Parking lots do not have easy access. Curb issues, you know, if you're parallel parking, you have streets that have higher curbs. You know all the issues. We just heard them, and the public was really saying these are the things we need to address. And particularly, Raspberry parking lot is underutilized. So we have basically 4 recommendations of where you could probably do some parking. Now, keep in mind that parking, the concern a lot was losing parking. And so when we went through this, we always had the premise that we have to have a no net loss parking. So even though it may be moved around a little bit, it's the same parking, probably even more if you do it the right way. We're able to do some work with some private property owners. So that was really a goal of ours, and that we were able to succeed, to do that. First, this is a very simple one, restripe. Just get some paint out, beautify Vallecito parking lot, and sign it so people know that it's returning back to town. So they really know that they haven't missed it and they can still come back. And this, of course, would work closely with when the Angels Camp Trail comes through, because it's passing through that same area. So whatever happens with that trail may look at this and say, how can they work together? Second one is just Raspberry parking lot. Creating, you already, I believe you're going forward with the stairs. Yeah, so that was just an easy one. I mean, you're doing it. But really then making it so that people do know where it's at. So again, signing it, providing those connectivities. And in case in the lower section, if the property owner was agreeable or there's some sort of deal to work it, there's ways to get additional parking up there as well that's within walking distance. The main thing is just not seen. You have to make sure you be able to tell people where to go park. This is just in the interest of putting parking downtown. You already have a surface lot there. If you needed to increase some numbers and knowing that there's other things going on within the community, this was just to illustrate that you could fit a parking structure in there. It's not to say to build it or not, but just recognize that the space is there. You do want to make sure that the front of that is very treated very sensitively, so it doesn't look like a parking lot. And again, bring that character. So whatever the design of that is, there's room to do that. And then finally, parking management plan. I think that gets to things as simple as where employees park, where when you have special events, how that happens. A lot of times the employee parking takes up the prime spots. So all the way down to sometimes there's time parking, 1 hour maximum time. Because the businesses on Main Street and other places want to have some frequency of turnover. Recognizing that someone doesn't eat in an hour, so you have to have some flexibility in that. But that's that would all be wrapped up in a parking management plan that could come forward at a later date. Now, I'll talk a little bit about public spaces. I think the woman earlier that was mentioning about Utica Park, and that really is your public space for the most part, and it's well used and it's well loved. What we're doing is trying to find if there are other small areas within town that can bring some of those public spaces closer to really where the Main Street area is. So we'll talk about these historic downtown public spaces. So this image just shows right in front of the movie theater, where just bumping the spaces there to remove a couple parking spaces and create a plaza there. And instantly, someone coming to town, you'll see things going on. It's really a very simple and easy solution to create a fair amount of public space. And that public space could be used for a number of different reasons. But again, it's not difficult. We've already looked at it, and there's room there for it. Recommendations. This is something that you've probably either seen or have heard or actually experienced. To find ways to create temporary spaces, and they may evolve into permanent, depends on how things work out from a approval process and a construction process. But even just putting in what is before up there, the opportunity during the summertime to take a couple spaces, one or two, put some outdoor seating, and recognize that you could seat maybe 10 people, 12 people in the same place that one car sits, and think about a dollar value at someone eating dinner. I think it really tells a story. And in communities like this, they tend to be temporary. So when the winter time comes, you want to lift them because you want people to park closer to the stores when it's raining. But the summertime, that 1 or 2 or 3 spaces wouldn't really do a whole lot to really discourage parking downtown. And then finally, there's the opportunity to maybe work with the private owner next to the visitor center, the express of having a park there of some sort. So I think that would be a very important and valuable community space if that does come to fruition. And then finally, the downtown Angels Creek Trail. This is just a diagram to say when that trail is coming through, there are some opportunities. Again, with working with private private property owners and how the trail is designed to maybe access the Raspberry parking lot connecting through to the Choi Building Historic Plaza. So really reinvent that space as an amenity rather than just something that people have to kind of halfway discover. And then really tying that down into the whole downtown experience. So you really kind of create a nice walking between the parking areas. And then finally, Utica Park, there was some mention about, and it's a challenge to get in there. You have to know where to go. If you live here, obviously you do know how to get in there, but then getting out, you have to go down the road a bit. So there are some opportunities, again, if it's been expressed that maybe have another out there that's much closer, so you can really open up the visibility of the park. The other thing this diagram shows, it starts to talk about, I don't have a cursor, but so if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see that snake coming down, that's a bike trail. And so I didn't mention about the bike trails before, but what we did from Murphy's all the way down to about this point, we had the room to put bike trails on both sides. Once you get to this spot, you start to get too tight once you drop down the road to get into the Main Street. So that's a kind of an out where the bikes and pedestrians, for that matter, can walk down and then use those surface side roads that don't have sidewalks and as a way of getting bikes through the community without being on Main Street. Now, that doesn't mean you can't. I mean, I would ride my bike down Main Street, but if you want to take a family down, you have an alternative route. Similarly, what this does is organize the parking up along the roadway, create a sidewalk there. I mean, historically used to have a walkway down there. It's been blocked off with railings, probably because of safety issues, but really working back and creating that walkability and, again, the direct connection to the park. So I'm not going to show you what the design guidelines specifically in the document, but these are the higher areas. We talked about street design, bike lanes, site elements, parklets, parking, and landscape. That's all in a summarized document that tells about what we think would be appropriate for Angels Camp. So implementation, tonight we're here to adopt the plan. Again, it's adoption of a vision, not something that's built tomorrow. With that, you have the opportunity to prioritize some of your implementation actions like we talked about At some point, you might say, hey, this looks like a good idea. Dave, go find the funding, work with Amber, and those kind of things. That's identifying and securing the funding. And then also, if you do have, every year, and you have your fiscal discussion later tonight, next year you may decide we want to put that on the CIP project list. So it allows you to start looking at some things and say, do you really want to do this? Well, we've got a vision, we've got an idea, let's see what that might mean. And then monitoring and agreement. Summary of funding sources, there's a lot. When I say that, there's a lot, but everyone's competing for them. But the idea about having a plan in place, it gives you the opportunity to go after them. I know, for instance, Cal State Parks puts out their, I think it's the Parks Program grant every year where they, because we've worked with other communities where they've actually been successful in securing grants. So if you had a plan, go approach them for maybe improvements to Utica Park or maybe downtown space. So I think, again, this gives you the opportunity to do some more searching which ones might work for you. Some quick hits, that's, we call them quick wins. Restriping Utica Park and Vallecito Road parking areas. We didn't get into the numbers here, but just by doing that, you'd gain some spaces, which is good. Develop and coordinate signage and wayfinding strategies. I think that's, again, was an earlier document. Now it's a matter of taking it forward and really getting serious about how you start to implement that. Work with Caltrans to allow adjacent property and businesses to explore things such as a parklet or utilizing in and out of their properties to better either the connectivity or the community benefits. Develop a marketing strategy identifying and branding Main Street. I think Destination Angels Camp does a great job, and I think it's just a matter of keep building off of that. And if there's a way to kind of take that, be specific to certain elements, then this plan just recognizes that's important to get people to know where you are. Implementation of a customer preferred parking policy. That's, again, what I mentioned before. You really want the customer park closest, and then after that, the employees will find a way where to park. But that's something that needs to be looked at. And then some low-cost methods for traffic calming. So the bulb outs we talked about, there's a lot. Restriping sidewalks, or in some cases, we suggest in the document to move them down a bit because where they're at may not make sense. So those kind of things are just working with Caltrans and with the city to make sure those are consistent with what they're concerned about, and then have those move forward with some of those ideas. And then, of course, the document talks about leadership and implementation. So you all at this table have a leadership role. The community has a leadership role. Dave does. So it really spells out at what point and who should really be taken and running with certain aspects of it. So it gives you a little bit of a cheat sheet as to what you need to be doing at some point. So that's it. I'm here for questions.
Okay.
I don't know.
So go ahead.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and open up to the public for questions. Any questions? Sure.
I have 2 points. If I may. David White from Angel Oaks. I notice on the plan, at one point, you're suggesting we should, the traffic can come up
Can you
as a
speak
T-junction.
into the microphone, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, well, I was trying. Okay.
Thank you.
Have you got me now? I can't complain and then not do it, can I? Yeah, there's one particular part of the plan where the road comes up to 49 and becomes potentially a turn right only.
This one? Or you mean it?
Bragg.
At Bragg Street.
Is that the one?
No, I can't see it on there.
Can you see it here? This right-hand turn?
No, it's a right-hand turn, came up, I thought, from the high school side onto here and turned this way.
No, just Bragg.
Yeah,
It's
right now
Bragg.
that's a two-way at the bottom image, which shows
All
this
right.
right-hand turn.
Okay.
Right now it's a two-way street.
I would like to make a comment of that right turn. If I understand the picture right, we're going to turn towards 4 from that junction. There is already, in my opinion, chaos at 4 and 49, where there are only right turns around that junction, and 4, in fact, is used very much as a U-turn highway. And I was just wondering if we add another right turn that only goes that way, are we not just compounding that problem? And I understand that problem is a county problem rather than ours. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, that didn't get mentioned at all, has anybody thought about talking to US Postal Service about joining together our two minor little post offices? I understand from what I've been told that the owner of the ground opposite the high school would be more than willing to build a new building so that we could join the two post offices together. But the US Postal Service have apparently looked at that idea, and even though they would have a building up there where they could combine the two operations, they're still saying no. And I'm just wondering if we ought to start asking that question ourselves. And I don't want to get involved in a discussion about, we had two towns once, that was a long time ago. But if we didn't have the post office downtown, there's bags of parking at the post office at Alderville. It would release the parking on Main Street outside the current post office position. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
The issue I have is with the sidewalks, how high they are. Would that be eliminated? Or would that stay with history? Would that stay part of the history?
Yeah, those sidewalks stay.
Okay. So then if we have patio service on the sidewalks, we'd have the bump outs, right? The bump outs. So then if we had patio service on the sidewalks, we'd have even less parking. Right? If we put the bump outs, the patios out, where we can sit outside and eat, like in Murphy's and other towns, then that's 3 to 4 eliminations of parking, correct?
Temporarily. Again, it's not a final plan, it's a vision plan. Do you want me to answer it? Yeah, I don't know the process if they
There would be get some people some room out here. I need room. I got a big, pretty much the way the bump outs would work is they would work in conjunction with maybe expanding the lot at Utica Park, or the parking lot across the street. Also restriping some of the other parts. So the 2 or 3 spots that would be lost from a bulb out would then be gained, and the bulb outs don't necessarily need to be permanent. So if they're not permanent, then we would pick a time of year that we would pull them, and then you would have parking a lot. You would have those spaces back.
You're talking about parklets or bulb out?
Parklets. I'm talking about parklets. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The bulb outs, like at the intersections, don't take away from the parking at all. They're just part of the intersection, and they just bring pedestrians out. But the parklets, you would lose probably about 1 or 2 spaces. But we think with the designs of the future parking lots, with the future expansion of Raspberry, with the additional parking at what I'll call the Main Street parking lot, which is between the Utica and the Orphan Annie's building, or the thrift shop, and the potential restriping of downtown, or this parking lot out here, you wouldn't really miss those 2 or 3 spots within the community. But we probably would need to do like a trial run, kind of like how you saw on one of those slides where we throw out some stuff just to kind of see what it would look like before we do any of those improvements. And that would definitely have to come back before the council to do, and also get Caltrans approval if we wanted to shorten the right of way, or because actually from curb to curb is Caltrans right of way. So we would have to deal with Caltrans as well. Well, right now, the deliveries, we would have to maintain what they do right now, and so that was a big issue. That was a big issue that came up during the public workshops of how they deliver. I mean, it's not a conducive delivery area as now, but if we look on the plan, even the bulb outs aren't that far out to where trucks can continue to deliver how they continue to deliver now. We're not impeding the bigger trucks that are coming through. So it was just, we would have a little bit of a headache again with those trucks, and maybe we can work with the businesses to either get them to deliver in the morning or at night when traffic is less, when businesses are closed, because Main Street right now closes about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So maybe there's ways of doing that, but we would definitely work with the businesses before we started doing these things before we start implementing these things.
Anybody else?
I have a question now, Scott, to Dave. Shall I do it now or after? Because we're still doing the open. Okay.
Good evening, Debbie Pawnee, Executive Director at Destination Angels Camp. So we've had some members of our advisory council and board take a look at this particular plan, and I just want to comment that I think that the folks working on the plan have been very responsive to the community needs and the community questions and thoughts and concerns being addressed in the plan. This is a vision. It's not in concrete, so there's opportunities to massage it a little bit more. And so on behalf of Destination Angels Camp, we're very supportive of this plan and encourage you to approve it. And we are ready to help you in our partnership in finding some funds to get some of these things done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll bring it back here for discussion.
Could I make a note? This is a public hearing, so you are now closing the public hearing.
I'm now closing the public hearing.
Thank you.
Can I still ask Dave a
Now,
question?
yes, now we'll bring it back to
Let's
the.
see. All right, good, I went to. There you go. All right. My question was funding. What, you mentioned something, and I kind of missed the one funding that you said, but I know we have to implement, we have to go out and find funding. But is there any funding at this point for any of the plans that we have?
Well, it all depends on how you want to, I mean, there are, probably the only fund right now that would be able to mitigate funds, to be able to implement these would probably be our traffic mitigation funds, because those improvements are outlined within the program. And so in terms of that, all the other funds, I mean, park funds might be able to be used for some capital improvements, i.e. maybe the trail, a trail through the park, or, you know, for adding structure or those types of things, we could probably use park funds. Other than that, most of it would come from outside funding sources than that.
Okay, there's no, thanks.
No problem.
Yeah, I've got a question. It's kind of a chicken or the egg kind of a deal. You know, if you build it, will they come? Kind of a deal. Is there practical experience with any of this in the experience of your contractor?
Yeah,
There's been some real success stories with building out this kind of a vision and having a real positive result.
I'll let you answer that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, every community is different, obviously. You do have the challenges because of the limitations, particularly in downtown, the Main Street area. But with that said, you also have, I think, you have the interest, and it's funny because there's a big push years ago is the let's put sidewalks and trees in the Main Street movement. And that actually sparked a lot of interest in people putting money in. All those, were they successful? Probably not, but the ones that are successful, we already have some attraction, such a destination here. So in some ways, you have an advantage in that way. I'm sure some of these small gestures are enough to get people just around safely, but the plan wasn't, and you don't have the space to really come in and start from scratch. And so it's really augmenting the kind of the treasure that you have here and just play off of that. Personally, I've worked on plenty of communities where it has worked. I think it would work here. And I think that's why, again, listening to the community and what they felt were the issues and making sure we first address those, because if the residents don't like what's happened, then of course you've got an uphill battle. But once you start recognizing where residents come and reside and go downtown, visitors want to hang out with the residents. It's a good mix. And so again, we approached it from a practicality. Let's make it work from a pedestrian and circulation and safety issue, and of course some of the parking, things like that. So I can't guarantee it would, but I think many of these suggestions would definitely work.
Thank you.
And if I can add to that, Councilman Oliver, also like in the uptown area with the sidewalks, there's a lot of undeveloped property. So there's a lot of implementation that developers would be required to do as part of their coming in. So that also speaks to some of the funding and some of the implementation that would come in. In most cases, the tree-lined sidewalks in the Midtown area, it's worked in most of the communities that I've worked in, and it has especially the bulb outs that we've done. But it was a lot easier because we controlled the streets. The city controlled the streets. It wasn't state highways. So we had a better handle on that. So it would be definitely a much bigger coordination effort to do those with here, at least on Main Street.
But Caltrans has been a party to this.
Oh, yeah.
And through the process, they never threw a flag on the play or said that's a showstopper.
Not so far.
Okay.
There he is.
That's good.
But we can let him speak. We weren't gonna, but since he's here.
Becomes referee.
Here comes the underwriter.
Hi, this is Carl Baker with Caltrans District 10. You can't do that. No, Caltrans funds these grants because we want to see the improvements in your communities so that you can make the transportation system work, not just for cars, so that you can make it work for pedestrians, that you get that economic bump from having people milling around in your downtown. And that's entirely what this is all about. As far as success stories, it's a little early, but your grant up at 4 and 49, we're working on a project initiation document for 2 projects up there already. So the project initiation document is the first thing after we do the planning study, but the truth is, whether those things come to pass and how quickly that happens has a lot to do with how much push you have from your community, how much push you have from your council. If you push them, they can happen. If people forget about them and don't follow through, we have a lot of plans out there that people haven't come through and you know, made them come to be. But that's our intention in funding them, and you know, this came out great as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Okay. And that's
I don't really have a question, just more of a compliment to staff and everyone that has worked together on this. It's been a long haul, and I'm really excited to see this final in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to say that I do appreciate all the work, and I want to remind everybody that this is a concept, and it's an amazing concept. I really like it. I work downtown, so I know that as a business person downtown and a lot of the people that work downtown, we definitely park off the street, but we also cross those streets, and believe me, sometimes it's a challenge. So the bump outs, slowing traffic down would be amazing. And I just really appreciate this, especially with the parking issue. Pointing out the parking that is truly available, you know, there's so much more that is just not used. So that's a big key, and I love that. So, and I'm appreciative of DAC also, because I know, Debbie, that you are really involved with this too. So that shows community is caring and working with this, and I'm appreciative of everybody working on this.
Yeah, and as am I think that the fact we got so much public input on this before bringing it to a final was incredibly important. There are always going to be trade-offs. You might lose a couple of parking spots here, gain some over here, but you gain some vitality and a little bit of revitalization downtown. My wife and I just this weekend, went through Livermore to get to Pleasanton. We're going to downtown Pleasanton for a party. What a difference Livermore has been in the last 10 years or so.
No
And they have the bulb outs and the new, you know, pretty sidewalks and stuff. And we were running a little late, but I wanted to stop in and check it out. So, and Lodi is another example. They've got a cool little area with a microbrewery, ice cream shops and stuff on a similar situation. So, you know, I know it can work, and I'm happy to see the energy. And you know, again, we'll have to discuss some of the pros and cons of different things as we go. But I think it's all in all, it's a positive. So with that, let's.
Well, I was wanting to maybe mention one thing as an encouragement, but I'm not going to ask wasn't going to ask any questions. I just wanted to kind of read something more here than ask any question. It was, because I would just like to make sure that we as a city council, because one thing I was reading, I was so excited because in this plan, it's also implementation, which I was kind of looking for. So, gee, how do we get this going? What do we do? And I see here, it says, although implementation will require a firm commitment and sustained leadership by the city council to be put into action by city staff, the city should not expect to bear the full weight of implementation. Rather, the city should take a project management role, orchestrating a broad, ongoing collaborative process that begins even before adoption of the plan by the city council and extends through project completion. And talking about also joining with DAC and ACPA, and it goes on to describe how we would do this. Then it goes on to describe all of the different possibilities where we can get grants, and everything is laid out. I think it's wonderful. And I think if, with the city council supporting it, and then staff starting to take it on, I think that it could improve our community and draw people here that we've been waiting for businesses and tourism. I've thought of things where we can have even weekend excursion packages where people could come and they could do gold panning in the museum. They could do different things on weekends and come here and go to Worldmark or in our hotels. And then with the hotel downtown, I'm very enthused about the possibilities for the future. A lot of it is the tourism, but also we have the improvements in making the whole town look like one thing. In other words, we have historical buildings in the midtown. We have them all over, and somehow we could start coordinating all of that and bringing it down. So I'm looking at long-term, not long-term like 15 years, but I mean there's revenues that we as a city need, and we're going to have some short-term projects that we're going to have to do, but I think we must not lose sight of this. This is the main thing. Something like this and something like the development up on 4 and 49. Those two things will supply what we need to be, as a town, that we have the revenues that we need constantly, where we don't have to go and start cutting this and pulling that and doing those kind of things. So anyway, that's my vision, which I think is part of the general plan and part of the vision for the town. So,
Okay. Thank you. So with that, I'll entertain a motion. The motion would be to adopt Resolution 17-28, the resolution approving the Main Street Plan and sending to Caltrans for approval and close out the Sustainable Communities Grant.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilperson Herman, second by Vice Mayor Fallendorf. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Good job, guys.
Yes. Yay.
And gals. Okay. Item number 3 is a public hearing to adopt the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget.
Good evening. I'm here to present the final proposed budget. It's been a long road. We've had 4 different workshops where we discussed numerous things. We've made changes along the way. We're hoping that this is the final presentation, and I'm not going to take too long other than to give you some overall totals of how it ended up at this stage of the game. Okay, I can figure this out. Just to reiterate from the last workshop, workshop number 4, we were sent with 4 different changes to make. One was that we were supposed to fund the road rehab project all from gas tax fund instead of road relinquishment, so that change was made in this budget. The park fencing project was moved from the general fund to the park impact fee fund. The Destination Angels Camp was funded at $20,000, and the library was funded a little over $11,000. And we had a 9K project that was inadvertently left off in the water fund for the lead service line inventory project. Those were the only changes that were made since the last presentation at the last workshop.
So the staircase is in there?
Staircase was in there on the fourth budget.
And what about the money to fix the shade structure at Utica Park? That's
That,
$6,000.
that was added as well. I guess I missed that. But that was added as well, but it was added to the general fund.
Is that in these numbers?
It should be, yes. So what we're going for is a final spending authority of $9,294,864. The general fund holds the bulk of that, which is $3.4 million. Your wastewater fund has 2.3 and your water has 1.4. The rest of them fall somewhere underneath that. General fund at its conclusion, our estimated reserve balance coming forward is $750,000. There'll be revenues of $3.3 million, expenditures of $3.4 million, with a current budget deficit of $89,000, and the estimated ending reserve is going to be $661,000.
I'm sorry, Julie? I'm sorry. The expenditures, can you go back one?
Yeah, I am.
I'm trying to reconcile this to the forms that are in front of me. I know you sent us some this was meant to update what was in the packet?
That is correct.
Okay, and this shows expenditures and operating of $3.365 million.
On the general fund?
Do I have to add the project expenditures and debt service to
Yes.
that as well? That's 44.
The line items that are considered expenditures are your operating
Okay.
expenditures, plus your projects, plus your debt.
Got it, thank you.
It excludes the depreciation because that's a non-cash effect that does not affect reserves. I don't know, now I'm going backwards. Your roads funds just changed a little bit from the last time I showed them because we made the adjustment from the road relinquishment reserve to gas tax for $50,000 of the one project. So now the gas tax fund is going to end up with an estimated $41,000. The road relinquishment reserve will only be used for the Raspberry staircase at this stage of the game, and we'll end up with $265,000 in it. The road maintenance and rehab reserve, if you remember, is the SB1 money that's coming in that we suggested we put off into a reserve until we have enough to define a project. So that will remain untapped, and we'll get its first level of income of $22,000. Our local transportation funds are carry forwards from the other years and will be utilized this year. And our transient occupancy tax is going to end up with $30,000 in it. Again, we were trying to leave a little bit of room in the TOT fund because of the effect of one of our vendors having some downtime and having maybe a material effect. So that $30,000 will cover anything that might happen over and above what we projected in the budget. Impact fee reserves, again, these reserves are the ones that we can only use in accordance with our impact fee studies that we adopted and are only used for expansion issues in most cases or improvement issues. We did push what we could on here. The Parks is carrying both now the fencing project and the debt of the Veterans Park pool, and the fire fund is paying for the new truck debt that we had. So we have varying amounts. What I would suggest is as we get further into the year that this become a separate maybe planning process, budgeting process for council to look at. What are we looking at using these for? Are we keeping them here for a bigger project? We probably as staff need to communicate those things a little better, and I would project that we'll do that sometime second or third quarter. Water fund starts with about $5.7 million. Each of the individual areas, as we discussed, there's different ways that you keep money, are spending, either in surplus or deficit positions. I think the bottom line here was, I've got to go get my piece of paper. Come to my head. So the water fund net is going to yield $51,000 worth of additional revenue. That becomes $181,000 of additional revenue after you back out the depreciation, which is a non-cash effect. On the wastewater fund, we will actually bring in revenue of about $192,000. We will go from a beginning reserve, estimated reserve of $377,000 to an ending estimated reserve of $569,000. I really have nothing else to add. I'll take whatever questions, but before that, I'd like to thank the staff and how they worked with us. This has been a long road. I'd like to thank council for putting up with the things that we put in front of you. We put an awful lot of information in front of you across this, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions from the public?
Are you opening public comment?
Do I need to do this?
This is
I'm
a
opening the
public
public comment section, or the public hearing, excuse me. Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back here. Thank you. Okay, any comments, questions from council?
No.
No? Veronica? Julie did an amazing job. There's no questions or comments from the council. How about
She
that?
did. Hard work.
Well, I have to make comments, but no question.
Yeah.
Just real quick. This is a budget, I'm glad to see the water and wastewater departments are doing real well, or quite well. Our general fund is still, this is a negative budget. We're about 90,000 in the hole. And again, there are no contingencies here. Every department submitted a budget that was as bare bones as possible. We have no sinking funds for emergency, for our vehicles, for our maintenance, that type of thing. We have unfunded retirement mandates. So there's a lot here. It looked like we have some reserves, but there's a lot here to be concerned with. And we will spend the next year doing what we can to try to shore this up even more. But really, we need growth. So it's exciting to see so many people here, because a lot of you I know are with Destination Angels Camp. You're with the new street project we just went through. It's nice to see our men and women in blue here. We need to work together to grow this, to build the general fund revenue so that we can all have a happy life. So again, thank you very much, Julie. Thank you to the staff for this budget. Thank you for the council for all your hard work and the workshops, and thank you to all the department heads who I know worked hard to bring this budget in as well as could be. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget as presented.
Move.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Follendorf, seconded by Councilperson Matilde. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, we're on to our final item of the evening. Item number 4 is to draft a response of the Angels Camp City Council to the 2016-17 grand jury report. And who wants to head that? How are we going to, Elizabeth, you got that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate that this is a draft response, and it's responsive to Calaveras County Civil Grand Jury issued a 2016-2017 annual report. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it is just an assessment of city government. And they pinpointed some certain issues and made certain findings regarding our local government here. And therefore, we have 90 days once we receive that particular report to compile some responses and agree or disagree with their recommendations and their findings. This is the draft report. If there's any comments or concerns, now is the time for council to discuss your comments. And those comments, just to note, can be orally redlined into this draft. We don't have to actually go through it again in the next meeting. We can adopt the new comments and additions you have this evening,
Okay, thank you.
by a majority vote.
Okay. Are there any comments from the public? In fact, I'm going to do this a little bit backwards, because I do want to hear your responses, and it might take a little longer, but let's talk about this here at the dais, our discussions and edits and what have you, and then when we have a final answer that we all agree on, or that seems we agree on, I want to go ahead and read it, because there's been a lot of questions. I've been approached, with a lot of questions, and I would like to have our responses read into the record so that we all know what's going on. Is that appropriate?
Are you saying for us to comment now as you go through it?
We're going to go through this now and comment, and then if we can come up with something before we vote on it that we all seem to be getting along with, then I'd like to open up the public.
Scott, I'm just concerned, I'll talk to Elizabeth, but this is a draft, and it still has to go to the judge. So, I mean, until it's final to the judge, it's got to say final. I mean, I'm just a little, I'm not sure if this is
Also, so I'm
appropriate.
confused. I thought we were approving our response tonight.
Oh, you are, but you still has.
You can approve the response tonight, but any additions that you have, that is not included yet in this. So now I would have to go back and make sure that those additions are added to this, and then it becomes a final draft. That you can read. Does that make sense?
Oh, I can't read, so we can, you said we can insert?
You wouldn't be able to, unless you choose not to change anything, you wouldn't be reading something to the public
Okay.
with your changes.
Okay. All right.
You certainly can discuss those changes, and just as
Okay.
you had said.
Let's do that. Let's go by item with finding number 1, where the finding was that there's a lack of public interest in filling the elected positions of the City of Angels Camp. Have you all had a chance to review our response, and do you have any changes or suggestions?
No.
Okay. So we agree on that response. Can I read that response to you?
You certainly can.
Okay. So the city disagrees with this finding. The 2016 election to replace 3 seats of the city council attracted only 2 people who successfully filed their paperwork. However, this is not indicative of a lack of support in the community for continuing the local governance. There's a strong volunteer base that includes business owners and other interested citizens. Destination Angels Camp Business Association, and the museum are just a few examples where citizens and business owners contribute substantial time, effort, and money to make the city a better place to live and work. So we disagree with the finding that there's a lack of public interest in filling these positions. Recommendation number 1, on this finding, the city council should reinforce the need for greater public involvement at every opportunity. Have we all had a chance to review our response? Are there any questions or concerns? Okay. The city agrees with the intent of this recommendation, but disagrees with the recommendation to the extent it suggests the city has not attempted to do what is recommended. While all legal requirements for notifications are in compliance, improvements through the use of technology should be considered. Email notifications for routine and critical city business will be considered for implementation through links on the city website. In addition, the city will explore the potential for improved communications through social media. Recommendation number 2 on the first finding was the city council should create a public awareness program for the purpose of gaining greater involvement in local government. Have we all had a chance to review our response in that? We're all good? Okay, our response to that is the city disagrees with this recommendations for reasons stated above and because much effort is already dedicated to this end. The city has recently updated its website that we're working on, and a city official sits on many committees. The city publicizes all openings in the local government. Putting more resources to this end would require taking time and money from other areas, and our resources are better utilized elsewhere. Okay, the second finding, the current city council and staff are looking into reorganizing the structure of government options. Anybody have? Okay. While response to this finding was not requested, the city notes it's a sign of prudent management to always seek improvement in operations. Finding number 3, a former city administrator was acting in violation of the city handbook by independently crafting policies and procedures rather than implementing the policies as set by the council. Are we all good with the response?
Yep.
Our response is the city agrees with this finding. The recommendation, the city council, city administrator, and city staff should follow the established policies and procedures in accordance with the city handbook and set by the council. Any comments or questions on this one? As the grand jury report notes, the city council approved a written policy in 2015 governing the practice of employees taking salary advances. For approximately the next 2 years, a formal policy governing the practice was in place. In July 2017, the City Council adopted a resolution rescinding the right of employees to take salary advances. On this and other subjects, the city is strictly enforcing employment policies and procedures stated in its employee handbook and in other sources.
Just so you know, that should be stated.
Yeah,
Just
I
one-
said,
yep.
yeah, I thought I said stated, there we go. Okay. Finding number 4, the at-will performance evaluation form is inadequate. Any comments on that? Okay. Our response is the city disagrees that the performance evaluation form it has used in the past is inadequate. The first recommendation was the evaluation form should be modified to ensure number ratings are more aligned with behaviors, roles, responsibilities, and performances of at-will employees. Despite the city's disagreement, any comments?
Well, I did think of maybe there's room for improvement in some categories, unless that would go in the upper one.
Where would you answer?
Well, I was just thinking of, okay, the recommendation we took under consideration, I would think before that one, that the at-will employees represent, the more generic form allows flexibility for it to cover various positions that at-will employees represent. However, there is room for improvement in some categories, this recommendation, something along those lines. I don't know, I've just, I could see when I read over it, I could see that there was like, with the community, there was some categories that could maybe be in expanded, that's all, when I read over the form for performance. Okay.
Okay, so do we want to change our response or amend the response in some way?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't really see an issue with the current one, but if others would like to see that, that's fine.
Yeah. Be good to just to read, to define a little bit more, further. It would be good for us to go over the form, I think, and look at some of the areas where there's certain categories, and I think there's some weaknesses in some of them.
If you look at the first sentence of the response, the city does admit that.
Yeah.
So this says the city agrees that there's always room for improvement of the evaluation forms.
Yes.
So we have tacitly agreed with that,
So
while
the
still
city-
maintaining that our forms are valid.
Wait a second, is that in finding 4?
Yeah.
Recommendation one?
Oh, recommendation
Of
1.
finding
Oh, I'm
4?
sorry, finding 4. Despite the disagreement with the finding on this subject, to the agrees that there's always room for improvement. I guess so, I was being a little more specific.
Sure.
Okay, but I mean, it's not a big deal.
Okay, so we'll leave it as
Yeah,
stands?
I mean, it's close enough.
We good?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, the recommendation was that the evaluation form should be modified to ensure number ratings are more aligned with behaviors, roles, responsibilities, and performance of at-will employees. Despite the city's disagreement with the finding on this subject, the city agrees there's always room for improvement of the evaluation forms. The current form has a numbered rating system and also has room for a narrative evaluation to allow for comment where the numbered rating system falls short. This more generic form allows the flexibility for it to cover the various positions and responsibilities that at-will employees represent. So this recommendation will be taken under consideration. Recommendation number 2 was performance areas needing improvement should have action plans and timelines. Anybody comment on that one? Okay. This recommendation requires further analysis and consideration. The City Council will consider the subject in advance of the next regular scheduled cycle of city employee evaluations. Finding number 5, it was determined that city staff were aware misuse of public funds occurred.
Well, with our response, in my understanding, it says that city staff did become aware of the potential misuse of public funds in association with the preparation of the fiscal year 2015-16 audit. But my understanding in reading the audit and other things that I have read is that their staff was aware of all this sooner and earlier. like in 2014-15, the audit said that their auditor had referred to the problems in 14 and 15, and that some of the staff did know about it earlier, so.
What was the first year that the audit showed this issue?
I believe it was 14, 15.
Yeah, that's what I
And
think.
it was in the audit report of 14, 15.
Okay, so staff was aware in 14, 15.
And it was,
So we need
it
to.
was revisited in 15, 16. How does that sound?
But it wasn't confirmed, I believe, until 15, 16.
Staff
which
was
is-
actually aware of it in 13, 14, and made adjustments to the income statement and balance sheet at that stage of the game. The first set of auditors did not address the issue. They weren't addressed until the 14, 15 audit the first time, and then the 15, 16 audit the second time. So staff was aware all the way back to February of 14 and reported those issues up through the chain of command as they were supposed to do at that time. It just had not become an audit issue because the first auditor did not address it at all.
So.
Just to be accurate,
So it was not addressed in the 13, 14?
but staff was aware, I guess.
Okay.
I think it's important, just that we be, as.
No, absolutely.
No,
This
it's
is
super
the-
important, because
this
it's
is
going to
the-
go before a judge.
This is the first that I've heard that
Yeah.
that it was the 13, 14 year that staff was aware.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a reminder, this is before all of our times here, so we're trying to figure this out with everybody else. So we,
I just think it needs some rewording.
Yes.
Because
Yeah,
actually, it's
have
not,
them
it's
set
just
that
asking. if
Finding
it-
and that recommendation.
Then
Go
we
back
would-
to the drawing board.
Yeah.
I mean, the staff was aware. It just, we're saying 15, 16 year, it didn't mean we were volunteering that thing, but it just,
I think that's when it was highlighted.
it's just rewording. We're saying 15, 16, where Julie points out, staff was aware in 13, 14. The auditor did not bring it up, and we followed through. 15, 16 was when the main audit came out, if you want to, where they addressed it fully.
And we've already agreed with the finding, so we are just now giving them additional information.
so we just want to agree with the finding and strike the rest of the response?
Well,
That's
certainly
up to
need
you.
be
You can-
reevaluated, yes.
Are we all good with that?
Yeah.
So you
It's
just-
easily-
You just agree with the finding?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause that's a lot of the
So, yeah.
responses to these, to.
Okay, so the finding was,
anyway,
it was
it's
determined
good.
that city staff were aware misuse funds occurred. The city agrees with that finding.
If you're making a change, you have to vote on it.
Oh, okay. All in favor of changing that response to the city agrees with this finding? Do we need a motion for that? Oh, so I need someone to move that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilperson Herman, second by Councilperson Matilde. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Okay, recommendation number one, the city should hire a forensic accountant to review the city's financial records.
I have a question about that one. It says the recommendation has been implemented. I thought it was my understanding that we didn't have a forensic
No.
accountant, but we had an outside accountant. There is a difference with, so,
I thought it was a forensic.
but I heard it was again, this is my hearing, it says an outside accountant, not a forensic accountant. So they would to be careful there.
If I may, we did not have a forensic accountant in the truest form of the word. I believe there were two subsequent things that happened. There was an independent investigation done for city council, as well as an independent accountant who came in to try to value the amount of the leave that was overpaid. So those were the two things that happened. Other than that, all of the financial statements were reviewed in-house, primarily by me. I did go back a year and do a pretty significant review of all things that could have been affected, but other than that, it was only an internal process.
Well, I guess my question would be, what's a forensic accountant? Because we did hire an independent outside auditor to go through and try to determine, and they dealt with more issues than just the hours. He dealt with everything else. So I thought that was, or that would qualify as a forensic audit.
I don't believe audit does. I don't know what a forensic
Oh,
audit is.
a
I know it
forensic
digs
accountant.
into everything there is, even the past and different ones. But as an auditor, I
A
guess.
forensic
you would
accountant, it says a forensic accountant.
And they're usually auditors, but forensic auditors usually come in with a different intent to try to determine if fraud or collusion had taken place. They tend to do a different process than your typical auditor would do, and probably have a further reach, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, further reach into getting other records to either prove that fraud or disprove that fraud. Again, I'll say, I think this, from my perspective internally, I've been an auditor before. Unless you want to go back a few more years, a forensic audit probably wouldn't yield much more, but it's your determination on whether you want to go that far.
I was under the impression that we had already done that.
Yeah.
So without going into I guess maybe, I thought that was already completed.
I'd like to stick with the response that we have, because
Yeah,
I believe that qualifies.
Was my understanding that we had
Are we
completed
all
that.
good with that?
I'm kind of concerned, I mean, I'm not that much of a legal mind, so Elizabeth,
I-
what about that?
And none of us
So
are.
I want to reiterate, just as background, we have until September 5th, 2017, to submit this to the judge. Therefore, we have up until our August 15th, 2017 regular meeting to approve this. So this could really be an open discussion today, and we can kind of keep going back to the drawing board. So do not feel pressured to make the oral changes that you see fit and now adopt.
Okay.
If things are concerning, let them be a concern to you, and we can discuss them.
Okay.
What would be the problem? I was on a civil grand jury, and I know in the end, we did have a report that we did send to the judge, and then they had to respond, and it goes to the judge. What is our concern with accuracy in relation to what the judge is reading? You know, that's what I was wondering. What's kind of, how heavy, what is expected?
Like, will you be liable?
Yeah, I mean, if we say forensic, but it's not forensic, would the
Well,
judge?
This response
that be a
was-
problem?
This response was prepared by our attorney,
Mhm.
and he was the one that ordered the investigation. So I think that I would trust and defer to him as to whether this qualifies under this.
I would say so too.
Okay.
And a forensic accountant is a term, you know?
Right.
It could be that our accountant is qualified under all, you know,
Okay.
just as a forensic accountant would
Okay.
be. And all of the things we've laid out, we did implement. So we have said the action plan that we took.
Okay.
And it accurately depicts it.
Just want to be sure, you know.
Sure.
Okay.
You don't want any repercussions.
Okay. All right, so in that case, the recommendation goes, the city should hire a forensic accountant to review the city's financial records. This recommendation has been implemented. The city has properly identified the scope of inappropriate behavior in which the former management employee engaged. The city has also enacted measures to assure the behavior does not happen again. The affected employee is no longer employed with the city. To the extent further issues need to be examined concerning this employee, the city believes that those issues may only properly be evaluated by law enforcement agencies. Finding number 6, the City of Angels Camp has a payroll advance policy that has been abused and mismanaged.
I think it's number 3, finding number 3 instead of number 4, if you want to check. Otherwise, yeah, I'm fine with it.
I said finding number 6.
Well, no, I meant finding number 6,
Oh.
but we say the city disagrees in it. And I think I'm right, this is number 3. Obviously, I read this really carefully.
Yeah, it's number 3.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Yeah, so, that's all.
Okay. Finding number 3. All right. Anybody else have any comments or changes?
Is 5 correct then?
Is 5 correct? Where's that? What do you mean 5?
With Finding 5, we got them out of sequence here, if this is finding 3.
Oh, no,
No,
no.
it's not finding
It's
3.
over here.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, in the
It's in there.
narrative.
Yeah,
Okay, in the
yeah,
narrative.
yeah. In there, not there, yeah.
Okay, we all good with that?
Yep.
All right. So, they said this, again, the finding was the City of Angels Camp has a payroll advance policy that's been abused and mismanaged. The city disagrees with this finding as written. As noted in response to finding number 3, the abuse of payroll advances occurred before any policy was put in place. The problem, thus, was not the abuse, but the absence of a policy. The city agrees that the practice of payroll advances was abused before the policy was put into place. Recommendation is remove the payroll advance policy. Anybody have issues with the response? Okay. The city council has implemented this recommendation effective July 2017 with the city council's adoption of a resolution rescinding its former policy. Finding number 7, administrative staff was taking more administrative leave than was accrued, resulting in a loss to the city of at least $29,000.
I had a question. I know that the audit said 29,000. I didn't know, we weren't certain about how much was, so I'm just asking, so I have a little history, that's all.
Yeah, basically, we've had a number of, there have been a lot of numbers ranging from 0 to 29,000. 29,000 is the highest number I've heard. But we don't, other than that, there's no, we're still, this isn't over.
Okay.
We're still looking into this. Okay. So our response was the city agrees with this finding, but does not necessarily agree with the amount of excess leave paid as stated. Recommendation, the city should hire a forensic accountant to determine the full extent of overpayments. Are we good with this response?
Let's see.
Okay. Okay, our response is this recommendation is not warranted. As noted in response to finding number 5, the city has taken measures necessary to prevent against the misuse of administrative leave and public funds. The affected employee is no longer employed by the city. To the extent any further action may be taken to evaluate the actions of this employee, only law enforcement agencies would have the appropriate capability to conduct such analysis. Finding number 8. The City of Angels Camp has reasons for proposing dissolution of a city.
I've got a little insert for that.
Pardon?
I've got a little insert for it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You, ta-da.
As do I.
Second paragraph with the sentence beginning, "in fact." Everybody with me?
You want to put a this in there?
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, I think given what we saw in the budget, I think the statement can be better worded. The proposal that I have for that sentence is, "In fact, the pending budget action before the council continues to reflect a reasonable general fund reserve," in parentheses, a stated amount in percentages, whether that's 14, 15, or 16.
I thought the intent of that was to talk about that budget action. So in fact, this pending budget action, or this, talked about the elimination of the top-heavy spending. I thought this action was likely to result in overall improvement. I thought that was the key, or the
Which
purpose of that.
That was my understanding too.
Let's see,
Okay,
this was
well, then
an
I misunderstood.
improvement in our...
Is that, you all right?
Okay.
Okay. I had a thought.
I'm
Maybe
sorry,
somebody else first.
before you go, then I would need you, Mayor, to restate your recommended change.
I would say, I would eliminate the word pending and insert the word this.
In fact, this budget action?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
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 Okay, I have a question about it. Well, I don't know. It was this statement, "This city council feels that this recommendation to consider dissolution was subjective, politically motivated, and biased opinion," so on and so on. And evidence of their bias can be seen only in unwarranted recommendation, and that the actual grand jury should be investigated. And then some things about the cartoon. I don't know. It just seems like we should leave out that part of the whole paragraph. Because
We
it's
should what?
really attacking the grand jury, and
That's the whole
That's the
purpose.
point.
the grand
Because
jury...
they didn't do their job.
But the grand jury, I don't know, when I was on a grand jury, none of us were out to get anybody. And you had a
And you
lot
did
of,
a
and
good
you have a
job.
lot of members. You have a lot of members in the grand jury who are not Angel Camp citizens, so it's hard for me to speculate that they had a personal, I want to get Angels Camp. Now, it's just, again, it's kind of like questioning people's motives, and I don't know people's motives because I'm not inside their head. So I would think it'd be difficult to lay that out and say that with assurance, and that's all. So I don't think it's a good idea.
I support keeping it in there because of, I don't.
I was actually considering going one step farther and pointing out
Of
that the
course.
cartoonist was the wife of the foreperson.
Well, I did to say something about the cartoon. There is a little thing that has assessor on it, and there's another one, the CPS. So they did kind of spread it out a little, but I know that I don't know the politics of the area, and so I could be not knowing something that you know that you're putting here. But just so I could express my concern that it seems of questioning and just asserting some motives, which I don't think it's possible for us to know for certain.
So I'm not very political. I don't know. I wasn't on the council back then. The grand jury, first of all, the cartoon is just that. It's a cartoon. It's ridiculous, and I think it was completely
It was a foolish idea.
out of place.
Yes.
I mean, it just brought the legitimacy of this grand jury report down to a comic. And I think that was ridiculous, and I think it was very offensive. I think it's like, and I think also that looking at all the issues that were brought up and what had already been implemented by the time we came into existence, everything was handled. The only thing that was not completely taken care of was the advances, and we just did that in July. I mean, that was literally the last thing that I could see.
When this comes,
so-
when this comes before the grand jury, it is in the stream of history in which things are happening and things haven't happened. And so it is the grand jury's purpose to hold government accountable to the people and make sure everything comes out
But
that
they
is
didn't even-
necessary.
it
So-
didn't even
would-
seem like
so
they checked
we
anything
would-
out.
We do
And
want the
I
light,
would
we do
agree
want the
with
light to
that.
shine. So
Had-
it's important that it become aware. that-
I would agree with that had they conducted their interviews properly. And they did not do their job by thoroughly interviewing individuals that should have been interviewed. So had they done their job, then maybe we would be talking another game right now. But they didn't, and they failed. And they produced something that, to me, was half-assed.
As I say, I know that you have probably more of a history and a background for this, so I can't, I'm just making a suggestion.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not-
I'll tell you right now, I don't have a history and a background on it, but
So
but
it's
that's just my
It's
opinion.
just from my experience, that's
So it's,
just a little.
so it's my understanding that, based on the discussion here, it looks like we want to change that word pending to this, and other than that, leave it the same?
I'm going to wait and see.
Well-
I may not need to say anything.
Procedurally, we will only do a vote for substantive changes. That's just a correction. That's fine, if you all agree.
If you'd like to make a motion, you're welcome
Well,
to
you
do
know,
that. and-
yeah, because I might want to say no. Yeah, I mean, and make a motion and then say aye, and everybody else can say no. So anyway, I move to strike from this city on down to opinion has consequences. I move to strike that, and there'll probably be a second.
Okay, before you do, because I am sort of part of this response, just because you weren't here, and most of you weren't, but you two were, when the grand jury called to interview staff and city council, what I was told, and I guess I could be confused because I don't know, but I thought grand jury, I was told later that there's usually a complaint or something, so you interview them. The grand jury had said to me, "We just want to check and see what you guys are doing. It's been so long since we talked to you. Oh, it's no big deal."
Right.
And I questioned them several times and said, "Are you sure? Because, I don't want to put council together and all this." "Oh, no, it's no big deal." And so to me, it was politically motivated somehow.
Thank you. Okay, I believe your motion dies for lack of a second. So with that, I'll go ahead and read our response. And by the way, this was a committee of Joe and I and Mary and Derek. We all put these together. And Joe did a good job of toning me down on this one. So-
I know. I know, I was
So
expecting
this
something
is-
worse.
This is, we're being nice here.
You were very good, Scott.
So finding number 8 was the City of Angels Camp has reasons for proposing dissolution of a city. The city disagrees with this finding. After 105 years as an incorporated city, it seems quite clear the citizens of the community have valued local governance over one provided by the county for a substantial period of time. Rural governments almost everywhere struggle with economic viability. The financial constraints faced by the city, while severe, can be solved. Given the issues that exist in the county today, this city council does not believe the county services would match or exceed those currently provided by the City of Angels to its citizens. The city notes that it was able to reorganize part of its administration by distributing and reassigning responsibilities among staff. The end result was the elimination of a high-paying position at significant savings to the city with no change in service. This was an improvement and arguably eliminated years of top-heavy waste caused by administrations dating back 10 years or more. This was a good thing, not a reason for dissolution. In fact, this budget action before the council will likely result in overall improvement to the city's budget's reserve position, and it did. The city council feels that this recommendation to consider dissolution was a subjective, politically motivated and biased opinion of the grand jury and not a recommendation based on actual merit. The motivations of the grand jury should be investigated. Evidence of their bias can be seen not only in this unwarranted recommendation, but also on the cover of the report in the foreperson's initial letter to Judge Healy. While it was a Calaveras County grand jury report, not only did they have the nerve to put a cartoon on the cover, it clearly emphasized the City of Angels. In the foreperson's letter, instead of an unbiased investigation to find the truth, he clearly states that they took action, quote, to properly represent the perspective and feelings of those that submitted complaints, unquote. Further, he states that, quote, the grand jury's greatest strength was its emotional connection to the county, unquote. Emotion, rather than rational, informed thought, guided this grand jury. Finally, he likens this process to a game. This is not a game, and the grand jury's opinion has consequences. Recommendation number 1, the city council and staff should review and discuss Government Code 56668. Any changes?
Wrong code.
The city council will not implement this recommendation as it is not warranted for the reasons stated in response to finding number 8. Recommendation number 2, the city council should hold an open meeting to discuss with the public if dissolution is the right choice. Okay. Okay, the public is within its right to ask for this agenda item. However, since the grand jury did not make an intelligent case to warrant the city initiating this meeting, this recommendation is not warranted or reasonable. The city is a viable entity and provides vital services to the community. The focus should be its continued improvement in operations so it can better serve its citizens. The city council appreciates the opportunity to provide these responses to the grand jury report, and I will sign that. Okay, I would like, after hearing all that, that's it, guys. That's those are the findings, those are the responses and recommendations, and if you have any public comment, now's the time.
Who was the artist again?
The artist was, I can't remember the name, but it was the same last name as the foreman, it was a female name, so mother, wife, sister, daughter, I don't know.
I can tell you that.
You need to stand up, please. You need the microphone.
I agree with what has been spoken here today and support the comments. I do have a question of clarification, and I forgot the item, but when it talks about administrative staff abusing the policy, would it, to me, when I see administrative staff, I'm thinking City Hall administrative people working in there, when this was abused by one individual. So I'm wondering if a title should be mentioned and not necessarily administrative staff, because I think it paints a picture on staff that's not quite fair. So that would be my recommendation. to consider. My other question I have is, who on the city staff or city council was questioned by the grand jury?
So we're Mayor Cullum and Councilmember Bert Soban, how soon you forget. Sorry, Bert.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lori White. I have a question and then a comment. How many members are on that grand jury? And did they all review this report and sign it? Do we know?
I don't have the report in front of me, but it lists all the grand jury members.
Did they all sign it, though?
No, just the
Scott?
foreperson signed it.
Presumably.
Signed the letter to the judge.
Did the rest of them even review it?
Well, usually you have a committee, and then it
We
goes
don't-
before the judge after a committee writes it, and then it goes before the judge, who then sends it back if you have gone astray.
Yeah. The reason why I ask that question is that when we use the term, the grand juries in this report, it gives the impression all the members of the grand jury, and I don't know if that is true. The one thing that I would say about some of the responses, and I think that it's pretty obvious, is that there's a lot of emotion involved in them. And those that are newer or weren't involved in this on a lengthy time don't feel the emotion as others that were around when this, and you're taking personal offense to it. I don't blame you for that. I might take personal offense to it as well. I just think that if we got the emotion out of the responses, it would be a better response. It may have been politically motivated. I don't know these people that are involved in this political motivation, but we don't have to make an emotional response, just clarifying.
Yeah, I don't believe anybody took this personally. I think most of us weren't even involved in the situations. I think when you look at recommending the possibility of dissolution of a city because not enough people ran for a position, it was just silly. It was unwarranted. So that's why I just want to get that point across that, grand juries are here for a purpose. We understand that. I respect grand juries, but this one just did not bring it in. And they came out of left field.
And I would, and that's why I left the whole beginning part, really as is, because I did feel it was an overreaction. The city, if you really look into the city and see that there is a lot of participation, we do handle things well. And so I didn't comment on all of those, except for at the end, I did feel we got a little emotional, and that sort of thing. But no, I agree. There was an overreaction by the grand jury, and I don't know why.
Any other comments?
Just as a benefit of the public, I wasn't here for the interview and I wasn't here for, the process, but I have participated in this response. And with a little bit of a business background and having been a part of and a recipient of audits before, when I first read it, the tone, the specific accusations, and the nature of it just made my eyebrows go up. I couldn't believe it. The audits that I'd been in receipt of, with respect to findings that had solutions in the process of the audit, were so stated. An audit discovers something, fine. You found the answer. While we were here, they fixed it. It's done. And the finding just simply says the solution was arrived during the course of the audit. There's no demand for a response. So the whole thing was just really unusual from my point of view, coming in used to things that, seeing out in business, the way things are structured in audits. So.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say that I do like what you pointed out in regards to instead of the general, I think you just said it, that instead of the general staff, maybe that, person would be identified as the person that was
Or just the position?
Do
doing.
we want to make that change, say prior city administrator, or do we want to say,
Staff seems like it includes every single person that works in the city, you know?
So on finding number 3, it says a former city administrator. So I think it does designate who we're speaking about, but if you would like our response to indicate who we're speaking about a little bit more,
I think
is
we
that
should
what you're
keep,
suggesting?
I think we should keep it consistent. Please.
If you're going to speak.
From the podium, if you're going to speak to it.
I suppose I didn't mean that, putting a name. I definitely wouldn't put a name in there, because if you do, you might be liable for for a lawsuit from somebody, you know.
It's just the title, it's the title
Yeah.
with no name.
I'm not sure I'd even put the title in.
oh, this is in response to what Ms. Ponte.
Yeah, I know, but
Okay.
when you're talking about putting a name or a title in something, you just don't want the city council to be open to any kind of liability.
But since it's already public record, would we be, do we hold any liability? Because it's already been mentioned multiple times in other
Can you just say something
locations.
like an administrative employee?
Yeah,
Like
finding number
that.
7.
Which one are we on anyway?
Finding number 7, but that's not our response, that's the finding.
Yeah, they say that.
So we
that's
can't
their
change
finding.
their
We
wording.
can't change their wording.
Right,
I'd like
so yeah, it's really, they're the ones
This is
that,
the generalization.
yeah, so we can't make that change. Okay, any other comment? All right, seeing none, I will, I guess in this case, we're gonna, do we need a motion then to direct staff to submit a formal response? So we need a motion to direct staff to submit a formal response of the 2016-17 Calaveras County Grand Jury final report to the Calaveras County Superior Court.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilperson Olivera, second by Vice Mayor Fallendorf. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Okay, what I'll do is Elizabeth will make those changes, send them back to me, I'll make the changes, and send them on to you guys so you can see them and sign it, and off we'll go after, just so you
Okay, yeah, I
know.
believe I signed that right.
You'll sign it in its final form.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, let's move on to calendar,
No,
Susan.
we are going back into closed session, so we don't have your community since they don't
Okay, tomorrow at 5:30 PM is a COG meeting at the Supervisors Chambers. Planning Commission on August the 10th at 6 PM, and back here for City Council on August 15th at 6 PM.
Okay. Okay, with that, we are going to adjourn to closed session. So I thank you all for your attendance, and if we can go ahead and clear the room as soon as we can. Thank you.